Hey everyone, and welcome back to the second part of our Dior fragrance bottle rendering tutorial. So yeah, in the first part we modeled our bottle, and in this part we are going to set up the texturing and the label, and also the lighting for our final output. So yeah, let's just dive straight into it, and I hope you guys will follow along and stay till the end and hopefully pick up some nice tricks along the way. So yeah, this is our just our simple scene, and I just used an HDRI I found on HDRI Haven, and you can just experiment yourself with this and set it down to 0.3. And then I used these planes as sort of like my lights with their gradient texture on it. And just want to show you guys really quickly how I made this. I just started with the plane, and I'll just move it out here. And then I basically just added a principled BSDF. And if I go into the shader, you can see here when I have, just go back to the object, I will delete the principled BSDF and put in an emission, and this will make this plane sort of like emission light. This only works in cycles render, so you need to be aware of that. And then I just used a gradient texture and a color ramp. And I put in the color into the effector and the color into the color here. And this, you can see, made the gradient feature that we have. And you can also experiment with the values here, add more gradients into it, play with the strength, and yeah, experiment and make your own light sources. And this just creates a nice fall off on our product. Sorry for the sore throat, it's wintertime here. But yeah, so now we have our scene set up, and I'll just make a new window here and go into camera view. Move these stuff out as I usually do, just to make it easier for you guys to see, and zoom in. So now we have our scene right here. I will just take this one down a bit and change it to the timeline. And yeah, we should just start texturing and shading our bottle. So I will go into this mode again here, and I will just let me add a shading window here. So the first thing that we're going to tackle is our glass bottle, our main body here, so to speak. And I'm just going to do a very simple glass texture. Under the principled BSDF, I'm just going to take the roughness all the way down and the transmission all the way up. So now we just have our glass kind of material here. And if I go into the cycles view, it should be okay for you guys to see. It shouldn't load that, take that long to load. Let me just see here. Yeah. We have now our nice shaded bottle right here. And you can see the reflections from the HDRI, and also our light source here, making a beautiful gradient across the entire frame. Maybe I can up the samples a bit. Hopefully that won't change too much. But yeah, and for our metal piece in the middle here, I'm just going to make the roughness down a bit so it's more transparent, and then just adding the metallic stuff all the way up. Maybe we go down to 0.3 just so that you can see more like your own mirror in it. And yeah, and then I think I'm going to, just for the cap here, turn it to black, and then it should be more like plastic feel, I think. So just taking the roughness down a notch. Yeah, maybe I can add up a bit more light so it's not that grainy. Yeah, I don't know why it's going a bit slow, my viewport, maybe because it's glass shading we are trying to make right here. But now you can see over here that we have sort of our initial glass shading and our cap and our metal. So this looks pretty nice as it is now, and you can really see the thin bottom that we created from the modeling. But yeah, of course we need to add a lot to this bubble here. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create the sort of like the black and blue color that you saw from the thumbnail. And it's just a really cool feature. You can use it for glass. And yeah, there's so many ways to use this. So I actually made all of the notes that we need for this one over here. And yeah, so I'll just take this one over here and explain what it is. So the first thing that we have added is our color ramp into the base color, and you can see that now it turns it all black. There is some blue in it, but the blacks like overrule it because we haven't sort of mapped where it needs to be. So we can put in the gradient texture into the FAC, and now when we put in the mapping here, we should start to see that we have created this sort of effect. And the way that I did this was I created how much like the gradient, like how long the gradient should be with this color ramp, and then I just experimented with the location and the rotation of our sort of, maybe if I go into this view it's better to see. You can see if I change the Y rotation, we are rotating where we see the black, and also here like the rotation on the X, and I just found this to be like the way that I wanted, but you can experiment for yourself. And then I just kind of determined where it should be and how much we should see. And I just kind of wanted like a gradient with like the sort of, I'll just change it here, where we just see sort of like the bottom like slightly angled being blue. This is just the simple node setup, not too much to it. And if we go back, we just save to the cycles render, you can see that we now have this cool effect where we have like a gradient, and you could put in more colors here if you want and really kind of experiment yourself with this sort of effect. We also need to be adding our logo to the bottle, and the way that I did this was I just made the sort of like the logo is just a PNG, a transparent PNG that I found that I actually made it in Photoshop myself. And you can see here it's just like this sort of transparent PNG where it says the service, I don't know how to actually pronounce this, service, I don't know, but from Dior. And yeah, this is just the one that I used. And so I put this into the emission, and we should now experiment that nothing happens, but it's because we haven't sort of UV unwrapped this one yet. So I'm going into the UV editing, and we just save this one just for now. And you can see here now we have the sort of logo, and then we have our bottle here. So we need to be, if I just reset it, we need to unwrap this Dior text around our bottle. And then, yeah, this is always a bit tricky, and it really comes down to experimenting, but still knowing like sort of the way around it. But if you press U, you can start to unwrap this. And if I just hit unwrap, you can see that it's not really done a great job of like unwrapping this like a cylinder. We can also try to use a smart UV protection, but it just kind of puts out a lot of different kind of faces. Right now, and you can also like you can make seams if you like, for example, select the edges here and then mark seam, and then when you unwrap it, the unwrapping will sort of take your mark seamed into perspective. But I actually think we can, for this one, just work with a cylinder projection, or maybe just maybe a cylinder projection will work fine. If I just unwrap this one and if I just unwrap it and then make a cylinder projection, I think we can sort of like use this one and scale it up. And now you can see that we sort of starts to have our effect right here. Yeah, it's kind of looked different when I did it in the first way, but I think this is as good as it will get for our cylinder projection, and we can always, mess with this afterwards. But I'm going into the camera view, and now I'm going to scale this one up, and I'm going to move it around to figure out where it is. So I found it right here, and you can see that we sort of kind of need to figure out how this is going to work for us. Clear see, maybe it's because I made the effect, if I'm doing a cylinder projection here, it has sort of like, I cleared the seams and then reset it, and then now you can see that it's just sort of like cylinder projected it more as a cylinder. Sometimes you just need to reset it to make it behave the way you want. But now we have this sort of UV unwrapping effect here. And if I scale this one up and move it around, you start to see that we now have our effect come into place here. And I think we need to be scaling it more on the x-axis, and you can use this by just pressing S and then, for example, X to like scale it out a bit more and just move it around. And this is really just like experimenting, scale it up a bit again. It's too big, I think. Move it around like this. Maybe take this one up with the Y, scaling on the Y axis. So we now see exactly our DO right here. Move it up a bit so it's at the sort of like the top here. And it's just really experimenting with this. I think you just really need to be kind of dialing in where you sort of think it needs to be, or if you have a reference image, of course that will help a lot. I think it needs to be a bit bigger, so I'm going to scale it down again just a tiny bit, and I'm going to dial this one in again, and maybe on the Y scale it down. And it's just like, it's just a lot of work. You just need to be, if you want something to look good, you need to be like really experimenting with this effect. So like this, I think we are starting to see like the kind of effect that we want. Scale it up a bit. I think it's still too big. Like this maybe. And yeah, I know this is quite a slow process, but it's to show you that this is just like the way that I do it. It's just, I find it easy. So now I think it's where we want it, just for a start anyway. And the image, if you want these two to be more apart, you can take your image from Photoshop and make the space larger. Or you could, for example, like again, try scale your way to it. Also, if you just so you know, if you pick like sort of an area within the UV and you can like manipulate with the unwrapping effect if you want that. If you, for example, want a more curve, you can, for example, just take take these one down here and maybe just move it, and you can see it gets a slight curve. Just take this one. Oh, you just take this one. You can see you can like sort of distort the kind of text on the bottle. But yeah, for now this works fine, I think. So we're going back into the layout here, and you can see that we're starting to see that it clips, that it wants to appear other places. And under here, instead of repeat, you can just turn on clip. And when you do that, it stops clipping, and you only have it here on the front. So yeah, this is what we want right now. I think it's maybe a bit too squeezed together, and maybe we can sort of like make this one a bit larger as I showed you, but for now I think this works fine. I don't want to fiddle with it too much. You guys can do that yourself. But yeah, so now we have our logo in place, and our and if you want the white to be more like, you can turn it down in the emission strength. I'll just turn it to 1 here. You can play with that also. But yeah, so now we need to be adding in some imperfections, as this will just make everything a bit more realistic. So the way I did this was I found if I could just go back to the shading phase here, I found a fingerprint just from ambient CG and put in the color here, the black and white color. And when I sort of like, initially it was like this, I just added the fingerprints, the color to the color ramp again, and to a bump, and into the normal. And then also a mapping where I scaled everything up a bit. Oh, you can now see that we have our fingerprints on our bottle right here, but it's way too strong and way too much. And it started off like this, but it was too small, I thought. So by the wrong way. So by scaling it down, you can always also do this in UV editing, but it sort of also works here. But I think like this might be the size that, like this maybe the size that our fingerprints have, and still like kind of looks good. Like it's sort of like a big thumb right here. But yeah, of course it's way too much also when you go into the it's just sort of like looks crazy and not good. So what I wanted to do was just kind of start by removing some of the fingerprints, just 0.25 I think right here, just removing it, so we also have some areas where it's not that much. And then I just started scaling down the strength sort of to where I thought it would look good. So I just took a bright part here, and then into the sort of like our cycles render, and you can see that it still looks kind of not that great. And I'll just take this one down to, let's say, 0.05, and you can sort of see when I scroll in here, we still sort of have the effect quite sort of visible. So 0.005, I think we will start by seeing that it doesn't affect it too much. I can still see it here on my screen. You might not be able to see it on YouTube, but you can sort of see like the distortion in the glass here. So I'm actually thinking about taking it down to 0.003. And I think this actually looks quite okay for our taste. So now we just have a bit of swooshy effect, and it's not a lot, but it just takes it away from that unnatural, like kind of what to say, like CGI look. Maybe pump up the to this one here, color space to sRGB, as we have already laid in. But yeah, I think this actually looks quite nice. So yeah, this is basically what I have done now. You can also add like sort of the mix shader here. Note you could add, for example, scratches if you want to add that. You can also find that online. I couldn't find any on ABNTG, but I know they are available for you. You can also do like sort of maybe add in, let's say, some sort of like grain or noise texture. If you want that on the glass, you can sort of mix that with this here. You can also add fingerprints to the cap if you want that. You should probably do that. But yeah, so it's just for you guys to see that this is like the sort of like the way that we achieve this thing. And if I could just go back into the UV editing right here, I think we can actually, I want to make this better. So we can sort of like, it was a different way, we can sort of scale it in so we have it more away from each other. And right, like this here. And I want to scale it in a bit. And scale this one up a bit here again. Like this. Right here. Just looking at this. I think this looks a bit better. Let me just take this one down a notch like this. Go into the layout, and yeah, I think this is a bit better. But yeah, so this is just like the way that I made this bottle here. Of course, a lot of the steps that I showed you, maybe take this one down a bit, it's too much I think with the frame right here. Maybe just all the way down to 0.05, just so we just barely can see it. Yeah, this is like our final render. I think it looks pretty damn good. As you can see here, we have the logo UV unwrapped on our bottle. We also have a gradient light that I showed you how to do it, and yeah, the color texture difference here, and how to import fingerprints. So this is just like basic and necessarily steps to make when you're doing realistic renders. And of course you need to be tweaking and fine-tuning as much as you can. And you also need to be doing a lot in post with adding additional grain, for example, or like adding more, what should we say, like more contrast to the image. For the background here, we can also do something. Actually, I think I did this for the thumbnail. I actually just added a noise texture. I can see with a bump strength of 0.25 and a scale of 13,000 and detail 15,000. And this just sort of created like yeah, I just thought it would look nice with this sort of effect. But yeah, so this is actually our final render right here. As you can see, it sort of looks like the way it did on the thumbnail, and it might be a bit different because I made the thumbnail before this one. But yeah, hope you guys learned something from this, and yeah, happy to share and go create some realistic fragrance bottles yourself. Now you have a set of tools that you can use anyway. I know my render isn't perfect, but yeah, happy to share. So good luck, and see you for the next video. I think it's going to be more of sort of like camera angles and like how to control the camera and what effect the different focal lengths have in Blender, because my background is in photography, and there's a lot of settings within the camera in Blender that you can use, also depth of field and stuff like that. So yeah, looking forward to show you guys like how to use the camera like a real photographer. So but yeah, see you for the next video. Bye.